We often hear about international conflict over political or ethnic or religious divides.
Protesters take to the streets of Bamenda and Boya.
Clashes have left at least 3 people dead.
We are now occupied like it is a war theater.
But this isn't about that at all. In Cameroon, this conflict is about language. The African nation of Cameroon has 2 official languages: French, spoken by roughly 80% of the country, and English, spoken by the other 20%. To understand the language divide, you need to know how modern-day Cameroon came to be. In 1884, the German Empire claimed the region as part of this scramble for Africa. After Germany's defeat in World War I, the land was split between France and Britain as a League of Nations mandate. France took over the larger portion in the east, and Britain took control of a slice that was right next to its Nigerian territory. Finally, in 1960, French Cameroon gained independence, with Amadou Ahidjo becoming president. The next year, a referendum was held in British Cameroon, and the territory was split between Nigeria and the newly independent Republic of Cameroon. This led to the creation of a 2-state federation, French-speaking on one side, English on the other. Both languages were supposed to have equal status, but English speakers, otherwise known as Anglophones, chafed under Ahidjo's Francophone-dominated authoritarian rule. A new constitution in 1972 only made the problem worse by abruptly transforming the country from a federation into a highly centralized unitary state. Ahidjo stayed in power until 1982, when he stepped down and was replaced by his prime minister Paul Biya, who still serves as Cameroon's president. Unrest continued to simmer in the 80s and 90s into today what is commonly referred to as the Anglophone problem.
Armed patrols in a city at the epicenter of an unprecedented contestation.
A Reuters reporter then claims police opened fire on the crowd.
Things started to escalate last year in November. Lawyer and teacher unions in Cameroon's 2 English-speaking western provinces went on strike.
It is now more than a month that we have been on strike.
They rallied against the Francophonization of the education and law systems. After clashes with security forces that have left hundreds of protesters arrested, dozens injured, and some dead, the strikes have grown into a wider movement of social unrest. In January, Anglophone activists called for ghost towns by asking people to stay home in peaceful protests. Not long after, the government responded. 2 Anglophone groups were banned and 3 lead activists were arrested on terrorism charges. The government also shut off all internet in the Western Anglophone provinces. The United Nations and human rights groups condemned the government's actions. The government has attempted to ease tensions and eventually restored internet access late April. But the Anglophone groups still demand detained protesters and lead activists be released. The Anglophone problem isn't only a linguistic issue, it's also a political one. As part of their colonial past, Anglophones and Francophones have different sets of cultures and different sets of laws. Cameroon's 2 English-speaking provinces use English common law. The French-speaking provinces, French civil law. Anglophones are also poorly represented in the government. Some Anglophone groups want to eventually return to a federalized state through a referendum. Others are demanding outright secession and the creation of an entirely new state, one built for Anglophone society.